We are very honored today to have with us His Eminence Archbishop Demetrios of America, the Primate of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and the Exarch of the Ecumenical Patriarchate for the Western Hemisphere. It is a great honor, Your Eminence, that you're with us today. And I would like to call upon Dr. Achilles Adimantiadis to introduce His Eminence.
It is a great pleasure for me to have the honor to introduce His Eminence today. It is difficult for me to avoid injecting personal impressions and reminiscences from the time I first met His Eminence in 1952, when I first descended upon Athens to pursue my studies in the National Metsovian Polytechnion. And I met Demetrios Trakatellis, still in civilian clothes, who was put in charge of keeping watch over unruly youth full of missionary zeal, excessive enthusiasm, and outlandish ideas. I still recall our first argument when I wanted to include Glenn Miller's Rhapsody in Blue in a musical event dominated by the three Bs, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. And Demetrios Trakatellis did not feel that Miller belonged very well in that company. In retrospect, I feel that he had a good point. But I do not recall if the point was taken at the time, because I recall being a rather stubborn young man in my opinions. I reckon it was, he started his pastoral service at still being a lay person. And I must say, if I can be allowed, a very personal note, that he has been for me since those days and throughout our long association and friendship, a guide and an inspiration in moral rectitude, spiritual development, and intellectual achievement. But that's a very long time ago. So I need to focus a little bit more on current events. First, a brief outline of his long CV. In 1950, he graduated with distinction from the University of Athens School of Theology. In 1960, he was ordained a deacon, and in 1964, a priest. He was elected Bishop of Restana in 1967, an auxiliary bishop of the Archbishopric of Athens, with the primary responsibility for the theological education of the clergy. From 65 to 71, on scholarship from Harvard Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, he studied New Testament and Christian origins and was awarded a PhD with distinction in 1972. After receiving his degree, he returned to his ecclesiastical position in Athens. In 1968, he was elected Metropolitan of Attica and Megaris, but much to his credit, he did not accept the post for reasons related to the canonical order of the Church and to political conditions prevailing in Greece at that time. There aren't many persons that I know who have the strength of conviction to decline a high position when it is offered. In 1977, he earned a second doctorate, a theology degree, from the University of Athens. From 83 to 93, he served as the Distinguished Professor of Biblical Studies and Christian Origins at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Brookline, Massachusetts. Serving as a faculty member for more than a decade, he taught many of America's Greek Orthodox clergy. One more reason: he maintains such close ties with and commands the unwavering respect and loyalty of the priests of the Archdiocese. He also taught at Harvard University School as visiting professor of New Testament from 1984 to 1985 and from 88 to 89. In August 1991, the Holy Synod of the Church of Greece elevated him to the titular Metropolitan of Restana. In 93, he returned to Greece to pursue full-time scholarly writing and research. He was elected Archbishop of America in August 19, 1999 by the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and was enthroned September 18, 1999 at the Archdiocesan Cathedral of the Holy Trinity of New York City. His direct district is that of New York, but he also presides over the Eparchial Synod of the Greek Orthodox Church of America. As Exarch of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, he became also the chairman of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of North and Central America. I take special pride and satisfaction in stating that he is also the chairman of the Archdiocesan Advisory Committee on Science and Technology, a co-sponsor of this conference, whose establishment in the year 2000 he has embraced wholeheartedly and supported strongly throughout its existence. I must also add from personal experience that the Archbishop has a very strong interest and even involvement in scientific affairs. And if I may, I recall in one of the clergy laity congresses since 1920, when he insisted on discussing Riemannian geometry, which took me very much by surprise. And I wasn't even ready to participate in the discussion. It would take a long time for the introduction, for this introduction to do justice to the multitude of his accomplishments. I will not attempt this, since you can also access it, of course, online. I will say a few words for his ministry in 4 areas: Archiepiscopal, Inter-Orthodox and Interfaith, C, philanthropic, and D, recognition and honors and academic accomplishments. As Archbishop of America, he has exercised the authority of his office and has delivered his pastoral duties with uncommon distinction and dedication. He has excelled in a manifold way, that is to say, with fatherly love, profound wisdom, unusual biblical and theological understanding, great tactfulness and gentleness, a soft and fatherly approach to corrective action, and breadth and depth of knowledge. Thus, he has been an example for emulation to laypersons, but also, and most importantly, to the clergymen of the Church. In the inter-Orthodox and interfaith ministry, he has also been a very prominent leader. From 1999 to 2009, Bishop Demetrios served as chairman of the Standing Conference of the Canonical Orthodox Bishops of America, of the Americans rather, known as SCOBA. In June 2009, the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of North and Central America was established, and the Archbishop became its chairman. He has shown steadfast and uncommon leadership in this respect. He has paid visits to a number of Orthodox prelates around the world, popes in Rome, as well as with Protestant leaders, and he has established a going theological dialogue in these Christian denominations. Philanthropic ministry, which is very large. Following the September 11, 2001 horrendous terrorist attack, Archbishop Demetrios showed exemplary compassion and involvement. His efforts raised over $2 million in assistance to the victims. He joined other religious leaders in Washington, D.C. and New York in advising federal, state, and local officials as they coped with the crisis and formulated plans for the future. He affirmed the need to rebuild the St. Nicholas Church on Ground Zero, destroyed in the attack, and guided the negotiations with the New York City Port Authority that had led to the decision to rebuild this Orthodox church. Plans have been approved, and a design by the Spanish architect Calatrava is well on its finalization, if I'm not mistaken. He has also led the philanthropic responses to a number of natural disasters, including mudslides in California in 2003, the 2004 tsunami in Asia, Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf Coast, September 2005, the devastating fires in Greece in the summer of 2007. Overall, millions of dollars were raised in all instances by the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America and were dispersed to victims worldwide. It is not surprising that His Eminence has been recognized nationally and internationally as a leading figure in religious, spiritual, and theological matters. I will only mention one out of the many. 3 academic chairs have been named in his honor at Holy Cross Orthodox School of Theology, Fordham University, and the 3rd at the University of Notre Dame. Academic accomplishments are too many to mention and to count. He has received numerous honorary degrees and inductions from academic institutions in the US, Greece, and other parts of the world, which are too numerous to list. He is the author of 7 books and hundreds of published articles and essays. It is fair to say that as a church leader, the Archbishop has an unusually large in numbers and exceptional in quality academic record. It is a distinct privilege and a special honor for me to introduce to you today His Eminence Archbishop Demetrios.
Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to extend my deep thanks to Dr. Achilles Adamadiadis, a wonderful friend for more than half a century, and thank him for tormenting me for 10 minutes now. It was a spiritual exercise I had to have. And he always has been really a very innovative kind of person. And talking about environment, he was an environmentalist in the real sense. As a second-year student at the Polytechnic School of Athens, when we were talking about doing something with the furniture in our Student Christian Union, and we would like to do something that would be modern, but at the same time not expensive. So here comes, then the young Achilles said, I have an idea. We ordered to some good fellows some skeletons of the chairs, and we fill the seating with strings. So if you visit even today, these chairs are still there and saves plenty of material in that way. Really, he has been a terrific worker and a very prominent person in the committee that we have in the Archdiocese. Thank you publicly, Dr. Achilles, for your offering. I have also the joy to see in front of me, I see Father Christopher Bender, one of my A students at Holy Cross. Thinking now in retrospect, I could never imagine that one day we would be in the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia in Washington, D.C., seeing in front of me Achilles Adamadiadis and Father Bender, not to talk about Father John Chrysavgis and other good people, and listening to the introductory remarks and the very wise directing the panel discussion, dear Protodeacon. That was quite a thing, and I am very thankful to the presenters today. I'm sorry that I missed the previous panel, but it was technically impossible to be in Washington earlier than that. As a result, we have a reverse order of the keynote being not at the beginning. But I have an experience recently from a literary point of view. Someone suggested to me to have a look at a novel. They said, look at the novel, it's interesting. So I gave me the book. I opened the book, prologue, it's a novel. And then chapter 35. I say, chapter 35, it's a book starting with chapter 35. Well, it's a book narrated in reverse. So it's the end of the book. You're going to 34, 33, you go back to the story. But the masterpiece of this situation is that the author maintains the suspense, although you know what happened from. So here we have a reverse of a situation. The keynote comes after. So we started with what was to be followed. So you have to think in reverse in a way. After the very specific presentations, when you go to something which is much more general. It's a great honor to be with you, I must tell you. Environmental policies are tremendously important, much more than we can imagine. As I was sitting there and looking, I said, what would be the discussion here today if this very same conference took place in Syria or Iraq or in some of the dry areas where the people really are suffering tremendously. And I always remember a discussion in an airplane with a high Turkish official back in 2006. He said, the wars and the conflicts in the Middle East in the near future would be related to water, not to anything else. Water would be the issue. And the man was conveying secret internal sources from the Turkish government. One more thing for the water. The water has a tremendous significance in the life of the church, the baptism, etc. But I always like a beautiful passage which comes from the mouth of the Lord, which says, anyone who offers a glass of water in the name of a disciple has his reward. Just a glass of water. It's quite a statement, really. The significance of the water. But now let me enter the thing before I see signs of warning me about the duration of my presentation. Dr. Adamantiadis knows that I'm extremely sensitive to that kind of duration of time, the economy of time, the environment of time. Think about that. It is really a joyful occasion for me to be with you today, this morning, in order to address this gathering of clergy, laity, scientists, scholars, students, faithful stewards of God's creation, an effort to green our communities and help render them, as we say in the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven. By the way, the order of the words in the original passage is different. Ως εν ουρανό και επί της γης, as in heaven on earth. But in the English formulation would be much more easy. I can see reversing the order, say on earth as it is in heaven. The meaning is the same, by the way. I'm grateful to the organizers, the Orthodox Fellowship of the Transfiguration, an organization formally blessed and endorsed by our Assembly of Bishops. Indeed, in seeking to transfigure our parishes and our parishioners, the fellowship reflects precisely what the Assembly of Bishops seeks to do on a pan-Orthodox level for the unified witness of our church in our country. The subtitle of this gathering defines its aim and purpose as putting Orthodox theology and ecology into practice. Harmony between heaven and earth, just as between creation and humanity, has always been a fundamental vocation and principle in the Judeo-Christian scripture and tradition, as well as in our Orthodox liturgy and spiritual life, based on the words of the psalmist and the claim of St. Paul that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Psalm 24, 1 Corinthians 10. This is among the reasons why, in 2001, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America established an advisory committee on science and technology, Dr. Adamantiadis, one of the pioneers, which is one of the sponsors of this event, with one of its 3 subcommittees undertaking the subjects of energy, environment, and economics. While, therefore, the comprehensive invitation to an inclusion of all Orthodox jurisdictions in this deliberation may be new, the focus of our discussion is not. It is, in fact, something that we are called and commanded to from the very outset of the book of Genesis, where our respect towards creation and our relationship towards God's creatures are mandated in detail. This foundational scriptural emphasis led to our liturgical conviction that God, the Holy Spirit, is everywhere present and filling all things, allowing for a vision of all things as being sanctified by God and inviting transfiguration by humankind. After all, in essence, everything is sustained by God and not by human beings. However, at the same time, we must maintain everything as stewards and not misuse them as proprietors. Therefore, we embrace a world filled with God's sacred presence and worship a God that imbues all of the creation. Let me deal first with a subtopic, environment and the church. By the same token, the universe has not changed, but society has certainly changed. Today we are dealing with a different set of principles and attitudes, another set of priorities and forces that prevail in our world and in our time. Sometimes these ideas conflict with the Orthodox Christian worldview. At other times, these values confirm the Orthodox Christian worldview with an impact on any discussion on the environmental issues. For instance, we often encounter a hardened concept of individualism, which is foreign to our theology and tradition. In the Orthodox Church, we have always emphasized that we live and exist as human beings within a community, and that we are saved as members of a community which is a church. Similarly, we frequently confront a perception of separation between God and the world, instead of a God who loves the world and a world imbued by God. This gives rise to a form of materialism or secularism, where the world is understood in a utilitarian way in accordance with the mechanistic model proposed by the Enlightenment. Such materialism denies the intrinsic beauty and value of everything proclaiming a world devoid of God and His Spirit, while ultimately desacralizing and devaluing all things. It's a well theory of an unbridgeable absolute gap between God and humanity. In fact, there have been some extreme theologies in the past, not Orthodox, talking about this kind of unbridgeable gap. As a result, God is banished to a remote heaven, very distant and removed from the earth. Thus, we can no longer speak of things on earth as it is in heaven. Yet this is a vision that radically differs from our theology and practice. Finally, if we separate ourselves from each other and from God, and if we isolate the material world from the heavenly reality, we inevitably induce an attitude of unrestricted consumerism. That's a consequence, which obliges us to seek fulfillment in having rather than being. Accordingly, the acquisition of material things becomes an end in itself, not because they are necessary for our existence and life, but because they are attractive for our identity, status, and pleasure. Things are no longer valuable in themselves or for others, but solely for our benefit and pleasure. The very negative consequences of such an attitude for the environmental issues within which we live are obvious. And let me then elaborate a bit on that. Does all this situation of a separation between the world of God and the world of humans threaten our environment today? It would be tantamount to belaboring the obvious even to raise this question. Threats to the environment are a common experience in everyday life for all of us as we observe and often experience the impacts of a multitude of ecological effects, not only in our country, but also and especially in other countries where many of us frequently travel and where environmental consciousness is less prevalent. Such affronts to the natural environment include toxic water, suffocating air, despoiled land, diminishing forests, polluted oceans, and rivers filled with pesticides, chemicals, and plastic, and an avalanche of waste. In 2008, we observed the massive spill of coal ash in Tennessee. In 2010, we experienced the disastrous oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2011, we witnessed the catastrophic events of the tsunami on nuclear power plants in Japan. In 2012, we were overwhelmed by the biblical floods caused by heavy rains in Pakistan. And closer to home, we have felt the impact of the deadliest tropical cyclones when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005 and Hurricane Handy hit New York and New Jersey in 2012. And we just have recently the 10,000 dead in the Philippines by this super typhoon.